Defending its funding, Planned Parenthood's president testifies before a Congress looking to strip its federal funding. Who will lead? With the Speaker's job up for grabs, House Republicans plot their path forward. Disappointing numbers. Crowd estimates for Sunday's papal mass fall well short of expectations. But overall success. The World Meeting of Families draws young Catholics into the church's mission. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 29th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us from back in Washington tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The Senate is on track to pass a spending bill to keep the government from shutting down tomorrow night. Some conservatives denounce Republican leadership for backing away from defunding Planned Parenthood. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell calls the stopgap spending bill the most viable way forward. Kentucky's other senator, Rand Paul, a presidential candidate, urges Congress to hold out. Meanwhile, Planned Parenthood is on the hot seat today on Capitol Hill. Republicans accuse the group of spending millions on political activities, travel, and lavish salaries. GOP lawmakers are building a case for cutting off federal funding. Jason Calvi is at the Capitol tonight with more. Jason?
Brian, Cecile Richards, Planned Parenthood's president, fired back today. She says that taxpayer money is used for things like STD screening and contraceptions, not for political lobbying. This 5-hour hearing today comes after the release of 10 undercover videos alleging Planned Parenthood is illegally selling and harvesting fetal body parts. But today, Republicans focused on the group's finances. Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards oversees a $1.3 billion budget. About $500 million comes from the government.
Congressman, let me tell you.
No. We don't have time for a big narrative.
I'm not going to give you you asked
yes
me.
Or no.
Committee Chairman Jason Chaffetz says the group has given $22 million to its lobby arm, the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. He also highlighted her 6-figure salary.
My annual compensation is $520,000 a year.
Republicans focused on the group's finances.
Planned Parenthood reported $127 million in revenue over expenses.
Why do you need federal dollars? You're making a ton of dough.
60% of our patients are receiving they're either Medicaid patients or they may be Title X patients. 78% of our patients live at 150% of poverty or below. We don't just get a big check from the federal government. We, like other Medicaid providers, we are reimbursed directly for services provided.
Democrats on the committee leapt to Richards' defense.
With no evidence of wrongdoing, these Republican investigations multiply and the political theater continues.
One of the Republicans on the committee said he counted 151 times that Cecile Richards and her team visited the White House in the past 6 years. Now, a Democrat today called the producer of those undercover videos a coward for not attending the hearing. But Brian, the chairman of the committee, says David Daleiden, the producer, wasn't invited.
Jason Calvi on the Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. Susan B. Anthony List President Marjorie Dannenfelser joins us. So if Planned Parenthood is defunded, will women's health care suffer?
Brian, for every Planned Parenthood, there are 20 federally qualified community health centers. So when Planned Parenthood loses its funding, it goes to those centers. Well, they will get more comprehensive health care. The thing that will change will be that we will not any longer be involved in the abortion business, which is at the heart of the business model for Planned Parenthood.
Will those federally funded health care centers be overwhelmed with new cases if this happens?
No, the reality is that if this change occurs, every health center that will receive this funding will only have to see 2 women per week extra. That's not a heavy lift. And those 2 women per week extra will be far more conveniently and far more comprehensively cared for because they will not be going to Planned Parenthood anymore.
You heard the questions there in the committee. Why is the federal government funding this organization that gets millions from very wealthy donors?
You know, this is the big question. They run a surplus every year. They don't need our money. They are the largest abortion provider in the nation, and our taxpayer dollars fund that big business, that big abortion business, while they run a surplus. They simply don't need the cash, and they don't deserve it, especially given all of that we have seen in the Planned Parenthood videos about what's going on inside of those clinics.
Well, this is clearly split along party lines. There are enough Republicans on Capitol Hill to get this passed. It's clear it will not become law under this administration. What is the point to keep going with this effort?
Well, the point is that we will have a point where we completely defund Planned Parenthood on the federal level. There is no question in my mind, and on the state level. Right now we're dealing with a political reality where knowledge is catching up with the reality of what Planned Parenthood does. Meaning there's been a mindset for so many years that somehow Planned Parenthood helps families plan their families, hence the name. This is not their major focus of what they do. Their prenatal care is 1 or 2%. Their abortion rate in terms of their prenatal care is 98%. So the reason that we're having a hard time getting this defunding battle now is that the bar is so high. We have large majorities in the House and the Senate. What we need is a president, and we've got a lot of great opportunities in the Republican presidential primary where we can very clearly see a president defunding Planned Parenthood when they get to the Oval Office.
Marjorie Dannenfelser, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. For the first time in more than 6 decades, a U.S. president meets with a Cuban president on U.S. soil. Their meeting comes after President Obama and President Castro each addressed the UN General Assembly. Wyatt Goolsby reports from the White House.
Brian, President Obama is back here in Washington this evening after chairing a gathering of world leaders on counterterrorism. He pledged all possible resources towards defeating the Islamic State, but it's his earlier meeting with Cuban President Raul Castro that's getting the most attention.
Flanked by members of his cabinet, Obama and Castro smiled and shook hands before talking privately. It's the second time the leaders of the once estranged nations have met this year.
Today, the United States of America is changing its relationship with the people of Cuba.
The two first spoke over the phone in December after Obama first revealed a plan to restore diplomatic relations. They met for the first time in April while attending a regional summit in Panama. Today's meeting comes as the two countries begin the process of normalizing relations following decades of animosity. While both have reopened their embassies, Obama said in his UN speech there is more work to do.
We continue to have differences with the Cuban government. We will continue to stand up for human rights, but we address these issues through diplomatic relations and increased commerce and people-to-people ties.
Castro agrees that the U.S. has taken an important step forward, but he said more needs to be done to improve the Cuban economy.
The economic, commercial, and financial blockade against Cuba persists, bringing damages and hardships on the Cuban people.
There is still much to be hammered out. Castro has demanded the return of Guantanamo, but the White House says that is not part of the plan. Castro and Obama spoke on the phone before Pope Francis' recent visit to Cuba and the United States. Obama has given credit to the Pope for helping facilitate the Cuban negotiations. Brian?
Thank you. Wyatt Goolsby at the White House tonight. And as House Republicans meet this evening, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy assures them he can bring unity. He hopes to succeed retiring Speaker John Boehner, who he calls a decent man with a good track record for the GOP.
He's one of the few standing that's won 2 majorities. But everybody is different. There's a generational difference about us as well.
At a GOP leadership news conference today, McCarthy spoke of a new culture that listens to all voices and, quote, has the courage to lead in the end. It is being called the deadliest single incident since the start of Yemen's civil war. Saudi-led airstrikes hit a wedding party in central Yemen, killing more than 130 people. An official with Doctors Without Borders says most of those victims died because the local hospital closed due to lack of supplies. The UN says more than 2,300 civilians have died in the fighting since March. The migrant crisis in Europe shows no signs of letting up. Several buses and police vans brought a group to the Croatian border where they were allowed to walk into Hungary. In the past 2 weeks since Hungary closed its border with Serbia, 78,000 asylum seekers have crossed into Croatia. They're hoping to eventually get to wealthier Western European nations. Well, we now have some numbers for Pope Francis's visit to Philadelphia, and they fall well short of expectations. Exact numbers have yet to be released, but the Philadelphia Inquirer reports a crowd safety expert estimates no more than 142,000 attended Sunday's Mass. Other reports ran as high as 800,000. There was plenty of room at the inn in Philadelphia, 1,300 downtown hotel rooms left unbooked. 71 local, state, and federal agencies worked to keep the Pope and the people safe. There were just 3 event-related arrests. More than a dozen babies were kissed by Pope Francis, including one dressed just like him. By the way, Francis did not eat a single Philly cheesesteak. Gloria Purvis chairs Black Catholics United for Life. Gloria, you were with the Pope at the White House. You were there at the closing Mass in Philadelphia. What stays with you from this whole experience?
The immense pride of the crowd. You saw Americans coming together, happy to be American, but also very proud to be Catholic and not ashamed of it. And I thought, this is new, this is wonderful, given we're usually chastised for showing our faith in the public, but in this case, everyone was proud and open.
Some expected the Pope to chastise Americans for our excesses, very evident in the security for his visit. It was really over the top.
Yes.
What approach did Francis take instead?
He took a very gentle, pastoral approach. He was very loving. He related to the people. He let us know that he understands what it is to be in a family, although he's single, as he says. But he understands the joys and the challenges, which I thought was very engaging and very warm and very loving.
And humorous. I remember when he said, in the family, plates will fly.
Plates will fly. I'm like, he's talking from experience, maybe.
Was his message on marriage, life, and family heard above all the noise about immigration, climate change, and other things that might be attractive to people on the other side?
Well, I think within the World Meeting of Families closing event, particularly the Festival of Families, where he spoke off the cuff, even though it was freezing cold, we were standing there in rapt attention to what our Holy Father was saying. And I do believe he engaged with everyone. Now, whether or not people want to continue to discuss it, that's another thing. But he gave us a chance to discuss it with our family and our friends and whomever, because he made this public address to all of us about the family.
And people are talking. Now the question is, what change, if any, will be made among our leaders, among society, as a result of this incredible experience we all had?
Well, if those 70 million Catholics that President Obama referenced during his welcome of the Pope stand up and start talking about the faith and start engaging in the public square, we will see change. So it's really up to us.
All right, Gloria Purvis, thanks for being with us, and we will see you on Morning Glory tomorrow
morning.
EWTN Radio.
Good seeing you, Brian.
Coming up, as world leaders meet at a UN summit, we break open the Pope's challenging message to that global body. And young Catholics get their marching orders through the World Meeting of Families Youth Congress. Today, September 29th, we celebrate the feast of Saints Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, the archangels, or Raphael. We turn to St. Michael to repel Satan. St. Gabriel, of course, is patron of communications workers like us, and St. Raphael is known as the divine healer. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Latin American leaders at the UN General Assembly hail the reestablishment of diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba.
Ecuador mira con esperanza el restablecimiento de las relaciones diplomáticas entre Cuba y Estados Unidos.
Ecuador's Rafael Correa saying he hopes the process leads to lifting the economic embargo against Cuba. Bolivian President Evo Morales also congratulating the U.S. on the new chapter. Their speeches come just days after Pope Francis delivered a powerful address to the UN, highlighting the sacredness of life at every stage. Anna Halpine with World Youth Alliance is joining us from Rome. Anna, what did the Holy Father say about the basis for environmental equality?
The Holy Father gave a very important talk at the UN this week where he reiterated the Holy See's commitment to the human person as the basis and foundation for human rights, for human equality, and for environmental stewardship and the focus on protection of all human rights.
Didn't he also talk about the human person's place in all of creation and how important it is to get that right?
He did. He focused on the human person as someone who is created and therefore not above themselves, not able to endow themselves with rights, but having rights and human dignity that needs to be respected, and that's the foundation for human rights. And this basis of human dignity that the Pope says is given from the Creator who creates them is also the reason why the human person needs to respect and affirm human creation and make sure that we protect the environment, protect the weak, and protect all of the aspects of creation that are around us.
In the Catholic Church, we focus a good deal on stewardship of our time, our talent, and our treasure. We're talking about stewardship of creation. Explain what the Holy Father said about that hopefully others can understand where the Church stands.
The Holy Father made a very important distinction between the idea of integral human development, which allows us to really focus on stewarding our own talent in drawing out, as he put it, the different talents and abilities that we have to bring the world, as well as our own capacity to understand our human dignity and to exercise our freedom. These are goods that he recognizes are fundamental to the human person. They're fundamental to the protection of the world and the environment, but they're goods that we have to develop and use on our own. So there's a fundamental difference in this understanding of integral human development, which focuses on the human person first, and then empowers that person to understand fully who they are in order to steward, to properly understand and protect all of the resources we have around us. And the Holy Father spoke a lot about the weak, the vulnerable, the poor, those in conflict, those suffering from religious persecution, and in a particular way, the environment, the earth, which allows us to live and which we have a duty and an obligation to protect.
But the language in the Holy Father's speech was quite lofty. Do you think that his message is getting through first to world leaders and then to the world?
I think so. There were many very clear points in the letter. He spoke very clearly about two rights that he seems to repeat over and over in his pontificate. One is the importance of religious freedom, understanding the reality of our transcendent nature. And the other was this idea of a right to education. But he was very clear that this is a right to an education that has to be focused on the human person. And if we understand the human person, if we respect the differences that we have as men and women, if we understand ourselves as creatures who were created and not gods who can just do whatever we want, this sets up a pattern of freedom. It sets up an understanding of human rights and a respect for the law that Pope Francis spoke very clearly about. I think the message is very clearly understood by world leaders, and I think that it's becoming understood as people study this very important address that he gave.
Anna Halpine with World Youth Alliance, thank you for joining us from Rome tonight.
Thank you very much.
And the World Meeting of Families last week in Philadelphia was the best attended by far, according to organizers. Nearly 20,000 people came from more than 100 countries, and the Youth Congress drew a record number of young Catholics. Susanne LaFrankie reports.
Faith of young pilgrims was the goal of the Youth Congress. While moms and dads were attending seminars, their children were getting closer to God through art, music, and even the chicken dance. 1,600 young Catholics from all over the world are dancing, worshiping through music, and expressing their faith through art.
I love Papa. Io amo il Papa.
Every activity is designed to bring them back to their Catholic roots. This time capsule will hold memories of their journey. It is to be opened in 10 years.
It's going to be exciting to open it and see what I was thinking when I was 17.
Teens are enjoying live entertainment in a cafe and listening to speakers address real-life issues.
Of course I pray, I go to church, the normal thing, but this is making me think a whole lot more about what I've been really doing.
I think being a Catholic, gives you a strong backbone, and it gives you more, to live for.
Megan Zinkowski feels an acceptance not normally felt elsewhere.
And they see what a beauty Down syndrome kids are, because a lot of them don't see that.
One of the big lessons the young Catholics learned this past week is that the church is bigger than just their local parishes. It's universal, present in every country, all over the world. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie, thanks for your contributions to News Nightly. Up next, Christie renews calls to defund Planned Parenthood as his campaign gets a bump in Iowa. And baptizing babies in the nation of Georgia is a bit more dramatic than it is here. With my heartfelt thanks, may the love of Christ always guide the American people. Hashtag God bless America from the Twitter account of Pope Francis. Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Many of the Republican presidential candidates, including New Jersey Governor Christie, want Planned Parenthood defunded. This week, he is campaigning in Iowa, the leadoff caucus state.
Should we defund Planned Parenthood? Of course we should. I did it in New Jersey 6 years ago. Yet, we haven't done that. If he wants to veto it, then American people will know where he stands on that issue. We should be having the Congress put these issues on his desk, show what the Republican vision is of America.
Christie trails in the polls, but he's about to get a major bump in Iowa. He'll be endorsed by most of the local Republican heavyweights who tried to recruit him to run 4 years ago. Jim Antle is politics editor for the Washington Examiner. Could those endorsements give Christie the boost to take Iowa and maybe kickstart his campaign?
It's a start. Iowa hasn't really been the state that Chris Christie's been focusing on. New Hampshire is the early state where he's been spending most of his time. He's gotten to be pretty far behind in general, both in the early states and in the national polls. But as the field shrinks, he's looking for new opportunities, and it could be a start.
Iowa does not seem to be Trump country. How will Donald Trump do there, and how will that affect his trajectory?
Trump has good numbers actually in Iowa right now, even though he doesn't seem like a good fit for the state, and he is building a formidable organization. Iowa can be a bit unpredictable. Sometimes candidates who spend a lot of time there end up doing very well. I do question how well Trump will do with his sort of bravado and his attitude and braggadocio, how well that will go over with some of the evangelical voters who are so important in that caucus.
Of course, right now the focus is on Capitol Hill, the leadership of the House. Can anybody challenge Kevin McCarthy? He seems to really be going after it.
I think it'll be very difficult to challenge Kevin McCarthy within the caucus, and I think the conservatives who were encouraging Boehner to go out the door didn't really have a plan B, don't really have a candidate who's ready to do it and ready to go up against McCarthy. The one shot, I think, is because the full House has to approve the Speaker, if you get enough conservative hardliners who say, we absolutely will not support him on a House floor vote, that could give them some degree of leverage.
Does a new speaker play into the presidential campaign at all?
I think so. I think anybody, because when you have a party that doesn't have the presidency, you're looking for the party to have a leader who's equivalent to the president. And until there's a Republican nominee, the congressional leadership is the closest that is going to come to that, to fill that role. I think the next speaker, whether it's Kevin McCarthy or whoever, is going to try to play a low profile in the campaign, but it'll be an issue.
And no serious challenge against Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side yet. Will Biden run, or will he announce soon whether he's going to or not?
I think Joe Biden would like to run. I think he has questions about whether after the death of his son he's emotionally ready and whether he can catch up fundraising and organizationally. But the email scandal has given him an opening to wait just a little bit longer.
We'll see what he does. Jim Antle with the Washington Examiner, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, more than 1,000 babies are christened during a mass baptism in Georgia this week. This baby gets a holy dunking. Takes it pretty well, too. Oh, my gosh, that water's cold. The patriarch of the Georgian Orthodox Church is godfather to all these kids. To encourage a baby boom, every child beyond the second born to an Orthodox Christian family becomes the patriarch's godchild. Since 2008, when this initiative began, the patriarch has baptized more than 24,000 children in 40 of these ceremonies. Data shows the birth rate has steadily increased since this practice began. Until tomorrow, thanks for joining us. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless you.